Can I just tell you that Cindy and I are just so happy to get to come and be here again. And I don't know, through the weekend we've been reminiscing, and we have memories that just pop up about when we've been here before, and different people and houses and details. And this is a church which Cindy and I really respect and appreciate very much. It would be a great and wonderful church if it was in the Bible Belt, where we have so many congregations. But for it to be in New England, where the church is numerically smaller, is truly remarkable. And I don't know if you know that. Maybe you do. But what I want to say to you is that you must protect the unity and the soundness and the love of this church with everything you've got. If I were the devil, I'd want to stop you from what you're doing. And he does want that. So God bless you, and keep on doing what you're doing. And aren't you thankful for your elders? Amen. And aren't you thankful for your preacher? Amen. And I tell you what, I just think they're doing a great job. All right, so thank you for letting us come. This sermon is one that I almost feel like I need to take off my shoes, because this is some holy ground right here. Sometimes our discussion with people about our Christianity doesn't come down to explaining to them about the Old Testament versus the New Testament, or what we do in worship and we eat the Lord's Supper. Not about that. Or about what the Bible says about what I talked about in Bible class. It's not about that. Sometimes it's simply about whether or not there's a God. Is there a God? And how do you talk to people about that? Well, that's what this sermon is about. So before we get into the discussion, I want to read a few passages of Scripture to you. Let's get our minds ready. Psalm 19, beginning in verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. That is to say, that if you live in this world, you've got the evidence of God all around you all the time. Day unto day utters speech, night unto night reveals knowledge. There's no language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out throughout. Some of you have done some carpentry work, and I believe that's this line where we call it popping a line. And it's a chalk line, and you tie it down there, and you tie it down here, and you get it right where you want it, and you pull it up and you pop it, and it pops down onto the concrete or whatever it is, and it's going to draw you a straight line, and you build off of that. Listen to this. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Isaiah 6:3, the whole earth is full of his glory. Isaiah 40:26, lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these things, who brings out their host by number. He calls them by name, by the greatness of his might and the strength of his power. Not one is missing. And one of my favorites, Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 4. For every house is builded by someone, but he who built all things is God. So you're with a member of your extended family, and that person says, I'm just an atheist. I don't believe in God. Or maybe it's just a neighbor. Maybe it's a friend. It may be a co-worker. And you just have this moment in time when he or she just declares atheism. You ever been in that conversation and it feels a little bit awkward? I don't know where to go with this. How do you explain to somebody something so terribly obvious? How do you say it? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. And hopefully, when you leave today, you'll have at least maybe a couple of things that you leave with and say, wait a minute, I can make that argument. That makes sense to me. I got it. I can get that. Then here's the first thing. How do you approach this discussion? Look on the board now. We need to respect his intelligence. Sometimes I think Christians may so deeply believe that anybody who disbelieves the existence of God is just ridiculous and may act like that. And I would urge against that. You need to talk with respect and with kindness. And the fact is that most of these people are not hateful people. They're kind people. They'll talk to you. They're not mean-spirited people. Now, I know there are exceptions to that. But what we need, you remember Acts chapter 17, and the Apostle Paul is on Mars Hill at Areopagus there. And you know what? It's just covered up with idolatry. I've been to India, and you can go to some of those towns, and there's literally an idol on every corner. That's how it was in Athens. And Paul could have said something harsh, something hard, and launched out with that and offended everybody there, and they go away. But what he said was, I saw one God. You know, you have a lot of gods, he said, but I saw one out there that was to the unknown God. I want to talk to you about that one. Don't you see how that was a reasonable approach, and the people would not be turned off by that? They would listen to that. And then he talks about the God of creation. He talks about the true, only true and living God. And he does that in such a gentle way. He didn't have to do that, but that's what he did. Number 2, find common ground. I am privileged to teach debate in the West Huntsville Church to our teenagers. We're part of something called Lads to Leaders, and it's a training program that we do. And in that program, the most challenging event is debate, I think. Well, I've always enjoyed that part of it and teaching critical thinking to these kids, and it's exciting. They just sit on the edge of their seats, and we work through these verses and Greek words and things, and it's just pretty terrific. And one of the rules of debate, though, is that you always try to agree or express agreement on matters of that debate with which you do agree. If your opponent says the sky is blue, you don't need to get up in front of the people and say, no, it's not blue, it's green or red or what. That's silly. You advantaged yourself by saying, my opponent believes the sky is blue. He's right about that. We agree about it. And you want to know what the facts are about it. And so you've done some research about this. And maybe that person would say that he's the same way. Or the fact that regardless of how you may feel about something, that you pride yourself on trying always to let the facts dictate your judgments. Well, I think that's something on which you and he could both agree. Why shouldn't we talk about the agreeing things first? And then we'll get to the things on which we disagree. Number 3, ask good questions. Let me just give you some suggestions about this. What if you said to him, now tell me exactly what you believe? Do you see the merit in that? Why that would be a good thing to ask? What is it that you, because the problem is that if you launch into this discussion with your friend or family member who's an atheist and you start out with argument, the fact is you're just pre-assuming, you're prejudging what he believes. Well, what if you get it wrong? Well, what if you chase some rabbits and it's nothing about what he really believes and you've embarrassed yourself? That's not what you should do. Ask him. And another benefit of that is that it makes him sort of commit himself. Here's what I believe. Well, okay then. Take him on his word and then go from there. What is it that you believe? Number 2, what's the best reason to believe in God, in your opinion, and why is it that does not convince you that God exists? Now, I love that question. I think it's not offensive. What's the best reason to believe in God, in your opinion, and why isn't that strong enough to convince you? Most people who claim atheism haven't read books about defending God. They don't know what the arguments are in defense. Now, they've read books perhaps about the opposite, but they don't know what these arguments in favor of God's existence are. You're about to help them to understand some of that. So let's find out what they think is the best reason. And it may be that it's the God gap argument, which is really funny. But anyway, the God gap goes like this, that modern technology, science has come so far to help answer the questions that man cannot answer yet. And in science and technology, and we've come so far, and eventually man will have all these answers probably, but not now. And so there's a gap there, and people use God to fill that gap. Right? That's the purpose of God. It's just because we feel some need to close that gap of things that we cannot yet understand. Now, I know that insults your intellect and it insults your soul because we're here to worship our Creator. But it may be that the argument will be something like that. Or here's another question that I think is valid. What would it take for you to believe in God? So what would do it for you? Now, I talked yesterday in one of our classes about my friend Connor. Connor's an agnostic. He's an engineer. He's in his 20s. He's not married or attached to anybody. And he started worshiping with us. Worship is a strong word. He started attending with us about 3 months ago, I guess. And he loves to come, and so he and I talk a lot. We sit down alone, and we've had many, many conversations. And I asked him this question recently. What would it take? Now, I think what you're going to find are answers like this. What would it take for you to believe there's a God? And he answered, I think that it would be that I could look up in the sky, and there would be the hand of God, and it would write, "Hey, Connor, I'm God. I am real." Well, in the first place, if that really happened, he wouldn't believe it. Is that a true statement? I can promise you, Engineer Connor would not believe that. He works in Huntsville, Alabama. You know, you have missile defense and space programming and all that stuff that those engineer guys do. He's not going to believe it. He would say that perhaps he was hallucinating, or perhaps this is some sort of trickery of technology to have this displayed in the sky, and ho, 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 that's not real. And if you don't believe I'm right about that, remember Luke chapter 16 when you have the rich man and Lazarus. And the rich man said to Abraham, "Send Lazarus that he can tell my 5 brothers. I don't want you to keep living like we were. I lived like that, and here I am in torment. I don't want you to come to the same torment." And so Abraham, send Lazarus to tell my brothers that, because if one rose from the dead, they'll believe. You know what Abraham said? No. He said, they have Moses and the prophets. And if they won't believe Moses, then today you would say they have the apostles and Jesus Christ. If they won't believe Moses and the prophets, neither would they be persuaded though one rose from the dead. Don't you think that's interesting? Let that permeate your mind right now and think about that. Most of the time, what's going to happen with an atheist, if you say, what would it take for you to believe in God? They're going to talk about some kind of empirical evidence. By empirical, I mean evidence that you can experience with your senses. Smell, touch, taste. And that's not how you prove the existence of God. I think that scientific technology has been who can deny that in reference to medicine and healing people, that those kinds of scientific tests have been just wonderful for those kinds of things. But you can't use those kinds of empirical evidence to prove everything. Why is murder wrong? Well, what empirical test would you put to that? The answer is, it's not like that. It's a philosophical point. And philosophy is the best way to prove the existence of God. Now you can't say, I know God exists because we found God's footprint in a field somewhere. You're not going to find a footprint of God. You don't do this by empirical evidence. I saw God, and that's not how it works. As a matter of fact, John 4:24 says that God is a spirit. They that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. You don't have that kind. That's not how you learn that. How do you know that love is important? How important is love in your life? Well, what scientific test would you put to that? Well, that's silly. It's kind of like trying to find a wooden cup with a metal detector. You're looking with the wrong thing. That's not the approach, and it's not going to work. How do you prove the existence of God? And today we'll talk about that, but it's all philosophical. Now don't look at that as a negative. It's a positive. I'm telling you, we do this all the time, and it's very strong, and it will prove the existence of God, as you will see. All right, let's do 4 arguments today. 4 arguments for God's existence that you can learn and you can explain. And some of this, maybe the first one in particular, you may want to do some study on your own. It's not hard to do, about matter and energy. And so here's the first one. Energy and matter. And I phrased these points the same way, 4 points. And none of these things come from nothing. Now, there's only a couple of possibilities about The fact that this world exists. The fact that you exist. Do you exist? Are these people in this room? Are they real? Is there such a thing as the human species? Well, you say, well, yeah. Are you sure? Well, yeah. I'm sure about that. And I'm sure this earth exists. I've lived in it all my life now, right? Here's the first and second law of thermodynamics. Now, I hesitate to use that terminology. I'm not a scientist, but it's important. Now, this is given fact, and so you can research this scientifically. And I'm telling you, if you have a patent for a machine that you say will produce energy, it'll produce more energy than it uses. It's a perpetual motion machine. The answer is they will not give you that patent because they will write you a letter and say, cannot happen. It violates the second law of thermodynamics. And thermo means heat, and dynamics means the way that it works. And so it's about energy and about the fact that here it is. Now, we humans can neither create nor destroy matter. We humans can neither create nor destroy energy. Now, that's kind of interesting because we use energy. You're about to have a New Hampshire winter, and you're going to use some energy. And it might be in that fireplace, and that's pretty good. That's pretty good heat. And what's going to happen is you're taking this firewood that has this energy in it, and you're going to burn it. Now, that energy still exists, and a lot of it's going to go up the chimney. It's going to just disperse into the atmosphere. And what this argument is that we didn't create it, and we can't destroy it. Now, the second law of thermodynamics is that energy and matter become less useful. So when you burn that fire and the energy still exists, first law of thermodynamics, you can't destroy it and you can't create it as humans. But the second law is that it's winding down. It becomes less and less useful over time. Now, the beauty of that is that I didn't create that fact. It is accepted even by people who are atheists, that this is just the fact. So you can look that up and you'll find that it's conclusive. I think here's AI. You know that AI is always right. A true perpetual motion machine does not exist because it would violate the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. Any device that claims to operate without an external energy source would either violate the law of conservation of energy by creating energy. You can't do that. You can't create it. Or the second law of thermodynamics by completely eliminating energy losses from friction and other dissipative forces. So there you are, the first and second law. You can't create it, and it's going down. Illustrated by an antique clock. One of my hobbies for the last 40 years has been collecting antique clocks, and I like to repair them. You remember the key wind clocks? Click, 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 and you wind them up, or maybe with a crank, and it makes that clicking sound, and the weights go up, or the springs compress, and the world is like that. It's about cause and effect, and it says that for every effect there has to be a cause. And that's true. And the cause for that clock is that you wound it up. You put energy. You had the energy and you put it into that spring. And now the energy has been transferred to that spring. And now what happens as you let it tick? And if it's an 8-day clock, if it's old, it's a 7-day clock. But it's going to tick. And what's happening is that energy is being spent and that mainspring is letting down until there's no energy left. And it's gone. And it exists somewhere. That's the theory, that's the principle, rather, of the second law of thermodynamics. The cause and effect argument. This is about matter. We can't create matter. We cannot create energy. It's like the hydro system. And you drink a glass of water. You think about this sometimes. That's very old water. We're not making any new water. It just cycles. The water, you got some beautiful rivers around here. And what's happening is the rain comes down, fills the rivers, they flow ultimately to the ocean, right? And then the ocean evaporates and makes clouds, and the clouds go over to the earth and drop the water back down again. You know how long that's been happening? Since the dawn of time. You're not making any new water. And people talk about conserving water. Well, that's not really what they're doing. You don't create water. You may just lessen the use of it. That would be legitimate. Well, it's that way about matter, and it's about energy. And so here are these facts that are agreed to by the scientists. That's how that is. Well, that's very interesting to me, because what that means is that the universe had to have a beginning. It had to have it because, see, the universe can't be eternal. It can't be eternal because if it was, it would have wound down a long time ago. It wouldn't exist. The energy would have all wound down. That's the second law of thermodynamics. And so the fact that it's not, that it's still functioning, means that it had a beginning. And now what happens then is that the atheists have to come up with some sort of a plan. So if the earth is not eternal and it had a starting place, when and where was that? And who did it? That's a big question, because somebody had to do it. If it's an effect, if this world and this planet and the human inhabitants, if we're an effect, then what was the cause? You walk into a room, there's one door, no windows, a small room, there's a table. That's all that's in the room is a table. You walk in that one door, and when you look at the table, there's a candlestick in the middle of the table, and it's burning. That's an effect. What do you know for a fact? Somebody lit the candle. How sure are you of that? That's not a scientific question. It's a philosophical question. How sure are you? You didn't see anybody walk in that room. How sure are you that somebody walked in that room and did that? And the answer is, you know it for a fact. How come? Because of the effect. And there's no effect without a cause. We have the human race, a complicated, magnificent human race. It's an effect. The atheist has this problem about when did it begin and who did it. It's not eternal because of the second law of thermodynamics. It's not eternal. And the answer is the Big Bang. The answer they give is the Big Bang, which I think is very amusing, because it doesn't fix it. It doesn't fix their problem. You think so, okay, the Big Bang is that originally there was heat, energy, and there was matter. And at some point, the heat got so hot that it made an explosion. And from that magnificent cosmic explosion came all the galaxies. Now, we didn't get to how how did they come along? That was later on. But that's how this universe came into existence, was the Big Bang. Does that create a question in your head? Well, who caused the Big Bang? And where did the energy come from? So you've got an effect with no cause? It didn't fix anything. You still have the same problem, which is, where did it originate? Where did it come from? Cause and effect is a law. We're familiar with it all the time. What if you have an effect, but somebody says there's no cause? You get it. There it is. In 2007, the New Scientist magazine ran a cover story entitled "The Beginning: What Triggered the Big Bang?" The article was to try to explain the origin of the universe. The last line of this article, now remember, this is an author that disagrees with what I'm saying, said this, and I quote, "The quest to understand the origin of the universe seems destined to continue until we can answer a deeper question. Why is there anything at all instead of nothing? Why is there anything instead of nothing?" Cause and effect. We've got an effect, but we have no cause if we're atheistic. So you're reduced down to this very troubling thing. Either there was a creator, a being that is transcendent, that is immaterial, that is eternal, because all those things are essential, and he created this. Either that's what happened, or we created ourselves. Spontaneous generation. Of course, that's silly. I know this is philosophical, but it's silly. Because before you came about, you didn't exist. How could you create yourself? How could the human race create itself? Because it didn't exist before it was there, right? So anyway, the first one is, and I know that's a little complicated, but the first and second law of thermodynamics is a scientific law that's accepted, and that's why I raise it, by people who don't believe in God. They just come to a roadblock and they just can't make themselves believe in God. They don't know how it came about or who started it or how it did. But so then you have energy and matter, but no cause. As Thomas Aquinas puts it, when you talk about it had to be somebody who was transcendent, that is beyond the universe, immaterial, that means beyond matter and space. It had to be somebody who's eternal, because if he had a starting place, you're back to the question of who caused this, who created him. So he has to be eternal. And if this being created something so massively complex as the universe, it must be someone who is tremendously powerful and creative. And Aquinas said that's what most people mean when they say the word God. Right. That's right. Okay, let's go on. I won't spend as much time on the next one. All right, life doesn't come from nothing. Now, this is called the law of biogenesis. And it's not really, so bio means life and genesis means beginning. It's not so terribly complicated. But just think about this. You can use this. You don't have to remember even the name of it, but remember this. Life only comes from life. That's it. So you talk about a calf out in the pasture, and how hard would it be for me to convince you that there's got to be a cow somewhere that birthed that calf? How hard is it? And the answer is, I couldn't make you think otherwise. There's nothing in you that would believe that calf spontaneously generate, because life doesn't do that. And that's true about every kind of life. You go look at the ocean, those sharks out there and those whales, you know what? Life comes from life. You go to the metro station and you're going to ride that train and you look at that filthy banister and you think, I don't want to touch that. That's got bacteria all over it. I mean, you want to tell you something about that bacteria generated from other bacteria. Life always comes from life. It always does. Louis Pasteur did this experiment. You can look it up. You'll enjoy that, about a beaker. And at that time, people still believed in spontaneous generation, that life spontaneously comes about. And he did this test, and it proved, and it changed a lot of things, because he proved that wasn't true with a beaker of broth. And I won't go into it, but here it is. The second argument for the existence of God is that life does not come from nothing. There are only two possibilities. Can you just think about this with me? Either spontaneous generation, that we created ourselves, or a single primary act of a supernatural creation. Either somebody made us or we made ourselves. Which one is it? And the answer is, it's always been true. The law of biogenesis, it's always been true that life always, no exceptions, everything we know is that life always comes only from life. Where did your life come from? Well, I'm not talking about your birth. Everybody in this room came from a reproductive system and human beings. Everybody in this room. I don't even know most of you, but I know that's the truth. I don't doubt that, do you? Where did Adam and Eve come from? And the answer is God. Thank you. They came from God, and so did you. Without him, we wouldn't be here. Now, here's number three. All right, here's number three. Intelligent design does not come from nothing. This is probably my favorite. I don't know. I like them all, but this one is so easy to use that everybody should be able to use this one. Keep this one in your hip pocket, and you can illustrate it in just about any way. All I need to do is to pull off my kinetic wristwatch, and that means it's one of those old-fashioned kind that's a self-winder, and as I walk, I can hear it's winding itself when I walk. You know, it's kinetic. And it's pretty accurate. It's got a date on it. It's got a second hand that's pretty neat, very steady, and that's my wristwatch. Now, I want to ask you a question. Did somebody design this watch or not? Designer is very simply stated this way. For every intelligent design, there's an intelligent designer. You want me to tell you how much you believe that? You believe it as strongly as you believe 2 plus 2 cannot equal 5. Right? You believe it that much. In fact, you may believe this more. If you look at a beautiful painting, now we're talking about an intelligent design. You look and you enjoy looking at beautiful paintings just like I do. Look at a beautiful painting. Somebody with great skill paints this portrait or whatever it is, a landscape, and you look at a beautiful painting. There's nothing in you that doubts that the beautiful painting proves there's a painter, there's an artist. You know that's true. Look above your head. Everybody look at that white box up there. Nobody designed that. Are you good with that? I mean, come on, because this is dumb. This is silly. There's nothing in you that thinks there's intelligence to what I just said. That doesn't make any sense. And the fact is that I've got an iPad here, and we've got a screen here that can show me so that I don't have to turn my head back and look at that screen. I can see what you're looking at. All that is true. I've got a microphone. Nobody made any of this. Look, that's where the atheist is. Only I would suggest to you in a more profound way than these devices. Do you know that I can see you right now? I can see you in color. Some of you are a little scary. I can see you. Do you know that I have the ability to smell and to think? That you and I, and communication, is that profound? Nothing that I talked about up here is as profound as the ability to communicate. That I have thoughts up here and that I can express them. That I've got wind passing out of my lungs, past my larynx, and I form words with my tongue, and that I can communicate thought to you, and now you have those thoughts in your head. Is that profound? Nobody did that. That's not just spontaneous. It just happened on its own. That's what you have to believe. And I'm saying philosophy is the way to go about this, because you don't believe that. There's nobody in this room that you can't make yourself believe any of that. I'm telling you that our physical makeup, everybody in this room came about by the reproductive system that's inherent in human beings. You have a digestive system. Is that a remarkable thing that you can live perhaps 80, 90, maybe even 100 years with a system that processes food? I don't have to go on about all this. I don't even have to do this, because you know already that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Is that a true statement? You're fearfully and wonderfully made. Nobody made you. Come on now. This is spontaneous. You only have two choices. Either we made ourselves or somebody else made us. Intelligent design. Intelligent design. I think it's interesting that, an evolutionist, Tom Mueller, wrote in 2008, National Geographic, an article which discusses what he called the uncanny, complicated maneuverability of a little blowfly. And he confessed in that article to the feeling, he felt the need to regard the insect, I quote, on bended knee in admiration. That's what he said about the blowfly. Why? Because of its complicated and mysterious design. He's an evolutionist. He doesn't believe what you believe. He doesn't believe God made all of this. But he said on bended knee, I'm amazed at the intricate design of the blowfly. Well, now, what does that tell you? I'm not talking about a piece of rock somewhere. I'm talking about something with an intelligent design. An intelligent design proves an intelligent designer. I'm going to give you one more thing, then we'll do the fourth one. In reference to mind and matter, what do you know? What you know from living as long as you've lived, and this will be true about the young guys too and girls here, what you know is that mind operates on matter. Matter does not operate on mind. So what I mean is that a nest does not make a bird to sit in it. The bird makes the nest to sit in. Out there in the parking lot and you don't have near enough room, you need more space. But let me tell you something about those cars. I know this is silly, but I just have to say it to make the point. The car didn't make you to drive it. Human beings, mind made the automobiles for humans to drive. Mind operates on matter. Matter does not operate on mind. Isn't that true? That house you live in, it didn't make you to live in it. Anyway, you get the point. You get the point. So how will we deny everything we know to be true in order to be atheistic? Here's the last one. And by the way, my friend Connor, who I really like, my friend the agnostic, he's coming to our assembly all the time, and he comes to our events, and he likes the camaraderie, and we talk a lot. I tell him, one day you're going to be a Christian. One day you'll be a Christian. And so I don't push him too hard, but I don't let up on him either. And I asked him the other day, what's the argument of the existence of God that you find to be the most compelling? And he said this one. And I don't know why. I think Designer is probably the one that I love the best. It's just so easy to prove. It's so strong. But they're all good. But anyway, this one, morality doesn't come from nothing. So let's take the atheist's position that there was a big, inexplicable bang. The heat got hot and it exploded and it created galaxies, and there was some amoeba, there was some small, but you got to give it billions of years now. This didn't happen fast. That's how it worked. It's like they had a lot of time. But there came some tiny spark of life spontaneously. Nobody created it. Nobody designed it. It just spontaneously happened. And then from that, over billions of years, you got human beings in this room right now. It's really quite a stretch. But the question is, if we came from nothing, why do we have a universal sense of morality? And I know that you could say, well, but Glenn, we're different about our values in reference to morality, and that's true. But some things we all know are deeply wrong. If I talk about killing a baby, brutally destroying a baby, and raping his mother, how many don't have to raise your hand? I know. How many of you would hesitate to say that's wrong? Come on, why is that wrong? We didn't come from anything. We came from nothing. Why do we have a sense of morality? We're not animals. Did you ever have 2 dogs? You put one bowl of food out for 2 dogs. If it's something they really like, you know what's going to happen, don't you? One of them is the stronger one's going to bite at the other one, and he's going to eat that food if he gets the chance. He's going to eat all of it and let the other one starve because they're animals. What about somebody a man and a woman, they produce children for the express purpose of sexual pleasure? You say, oh, wait a minute, that's wrong. How sure are you that that's wrong? Are you sure that's wrong? And what is wrong? Why do you even use the silly word? If we're atheistic and if we came about from nothing, if we spontaneously generated, and that's the only choice you've got. If there's no God, then we created ourselves. The created is not the right word. We made ourselves. This earth made itself. This solar system. In 2017, we were at PTP. What was it, August in 17, when they had that eclipse, that massive eclipse. I had speeches to make and places to be, so I was living on a clock pretty tight. You know what I did? I set my watch, my reminder, by the clock so that I would get outside I couldn't waste much time. Get outside at exactly the time to see the eclipse at the best. That's when it's covered up the most. I knew what time. To the minute, I knew what time. Come on. Think about that. Nothing made this. It spontaneously came about without mind. It's matter over mind. The earth created human beings to live in it. That's what they're facing. The only reasonable answer to the realities that we know is that there is a God. He is alive, in whom we live, and we survive. That's the truth. And when you think about these simple arguments, and you bring them to the surface and you ponder them, what you know is that this is right. And then, of course, from there you step to the next step and you ask the question, has He told me how to live? What does He require of me? And then you pick up the Bible and you study it, and then you become a Christian. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, night unto night reveals knowledge. There's no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Isaiah 6:3, the whole earth is full of his glory. I'm so glad that you're here. It's an awesome thing to talk about the existence of God. It's a silly thing, frankly, I feel like, to have to defend the existence of God because the evidence is so profound. As a matter of fact, Romans 1 and verse 20 says that the evidence around us is so strong that people who disavow God are without excuse. That's God's position. You hear me? It's his position. You don't have any excuse. I've given you too much evidence. And you think about this sermon and you know that that's true. I wonder if there's someone here this afternoon who wants to obey the gospel. We haven't been talking about obeying the gospel, but I think you probably know. If you don't and you'd like to talk about this, I'll be happy, or David would be happy, one of the elders, any of us, we'd be happy to sit down with you. I really mean it. Right away, we'll sit down together and we'll open the book and we'll talk. And we'll try to answer your questions and we'll show you what to do to be pleasing to God and go to heaven. But if you've already been studying that, you know what to do to obey the gospel. Now would be a great time. We'll be so happy to baptize you into Christ just the way the Bible says and for the reason it says. And if you need prayers of the brothers and sisters here, now's a great time. And we're family, and we'll be so happy to pray with you and for you. We're going to sing a song of encouragement, as is our custom. And if you'd like to respond, come. We stand and sing.